I stared in disbelief as Tate casually zipped up his suitcase, his nonchalant attitude infuriating me. "You can't be serious," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Your mother's condition is critical, and you're just leaving for a business trip?" Tate barely glanced up, his cold eyes meeting mine briefly. "Hallie, we've been over this. This deal in Florida is too important to pass up. Mom's in good hands at the rehabilitation center." I clenched my fists, struggling to contain my rage. How could he be so callous? For months, I'd been the one visiting Marlene daily, ensuring she received the care and affection she deserved, while he remained consumed by his work. "You know she's not just mom to me," I said, my voice growing louder. "She's my family, too, and she needs us now more than ever. But you don't seem to care at all." Tate sighed, shouldering his bag. "Don't be so dramatic. The doctor said she's stable for now. I'll be back in a week." As he moved past me towards the door, I couldn't stay silent any longer. "That's it? That's all you have to say?" I shouted, the anger boiling over. "You're a selfish, uncaring son, and I'm sick of making excuses for you." Tate paused, his lips curling into a smug smile that only fueled my fury. "Careful, Hallie, you're starting to sound like a nagging wife." In that moment, something snapped inside me. I wouldn't stand idly by while he neglected his own mother, the woman who had welcomed me into her family with open arms. As he disappeared out the door, I knew I had to take matters into my own hands. Tate would pay for his indifference, one way or another. The seeds of my plan had already begun to take root, fueled by the anger and disappointment I felt towards the man I had once loved. I would make him see the error of his ways, no matter what it took. The rehabilitation center's sterile hallways seemed to stretch endlessly as I made my way to Marlene's room. My anger towards Tate had only intensified since his callous departure, fueling my determination to seek justice for his mother. As I entered the room, Marlene's tired eyes lit up, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Hallie, dear, it's so good to see you." I leaned down and gently embraced her, trying to push away the storm of emotions swirling within me. "How are you feeling today, Marlene?" She let out a soft sigh, her frail hand patting mine. "I'm hanging in there, sweetheart. The nurses have been taking good care of me." Guilt tugged at my heart. If only Tate could show a fraction of the care and devotion I felt for this remarkable woman. I forced a smile, determined not to burden her with my troubles. "I'm glad to hear that," I said, settling into the chair beside her bed. "Have you had any visitors today?" Marlene's expression grew somber. "No, it's just been me and the nurses. You know how busy Tate is with his work." I bit back a scathing remark, not wanting to upset her further. Instead, I reached over and gently squeezed her hand. "Don't worry, Marlene. I'm here for you, always." A glimmer of appreciation shone in her eyes, and she nodded gratefully. As our conversation drifted to more light-hearted topics, I found myself distracted by a folder on her bedside table. Curiosity got the better of me, and I discreetly slid it towards me. My heart nearly stopped when I saw the words "Last Will and Testament" printed on the cover. Without thinking, I flipped it open, my eyes scanning the pages in disbelief. "Marlene," I said, struggling to keep my voice steady, "why does this will state that you're leaving everything to me?" She paused, her gaze steady and resolute. "Because you've been the one truly caring for me, Hallie, not Tate." Tears stung my eyes as the weight of her words sank in. Marlene trusted me, valued me, in a way her own son didn't. A surge of determination coursed through me. I would make sure Tate paid dearly for his neglect. "Thank you, Marlene," I whispered, squeezing her hand tightly. "I promise. I'll take care of everything." As I left the center that day, my mind was already whirring with plans. Tate's indifference would be his downfall, and I would stop at nothing to ensure he faced the consequences of his actions. In the days following my discovery of Marlene's will, a fire ignited within me, fueling my determination to expose Tate's true nature. I knew I needed irrefutable evidence of his neglect, something that would shatter any illusion of devotion he tried to maintain. The first step was installing hidden cameras in Marlene's room at the rehabilitation center. With the help of a tech-savvy friend, I strategically placed the tiny devices, ensuring they captured every angle. I would document Tate's indifference firsthand. As the days ticked by, the footage painted a damning picture. Tate's visits were few and far between, often lasting mere minutes before he rushed off, citing work commitments. On the rare occasion he did linger, his disinterest was palpable, scrolling through his phone or making hasty exits whenever Marlene attempted conversation. But the true depths of his callousness became apparent during one particularly painful incident. Marlene had fallen ill, her condition deteriorating rapidly. The nurses had called me in a panic, urging me to come quickly. When I arrived, flustered and terrified, I found Marlene writhing in agony, her face contorted in pain. The nurses informed me they had tried contacting Tate repeatedly, but he hadn't answered. "Where is he?" I demanded, my voice trembling with fury. "This is his own mother." The nurse's expression was one of resignation. "We haven't been able to reach him, Miss Jensen. He's not answering our calls." In that moment, something inside me snapped. I would make Tate answer for this, no matter what it took. Over the next few weeks, I meticulously gathered testimonies from the nurses and caregivers, documenting every instance of Tate's negligence. Their accounts painted a damning picture, a son so consumed by his own ambitions that he had abandoned his ailing mother. With each new piece of evidence, my resolve only grew stronger. Tate would face the consequences of his actions, even if I had to drag him kicking and screaming into the harsh light of truth. As I reviewed the footage and statements, a plan began to form in my mind, a reckoning that would leave no doubt as to the depths of Tate's indifference, and when the time came, I would be ready to strike. The sharp trill of my phone cut through the silence, and I glanced at the caller ID with a mix of trepidation and hope. It was the Rehabilitation Center. Taking a deep breath, I answered, bracing myself for whatever news awaited. "Miss Jensen?" The nurse's voice was tinged with excitement. "You'll never believe it. Marlene's condition has improved dramatically over the past few days. The doctors say her recovery is nothing short of miraculous." A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of determination. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, a chance to make Tate face the consequences of his neglect once and for all. "That's wonderful news," I replied, already formulating my plan. "When can I bring Marlene home?" The nurse's voice brightened. "The doctors have given the all clear. She's ready for discharge whenever you're able to pick her up." "Perfect. I'll be there as soon as I can." Hanging up the phone, I wasted no time. I gathered the evidence I had meticulously compiled, the damning footage, the nurse's testimonies, every shred of proof of Tate's indifference. With Marlene by my side, we would confront him together, leaving him no room for excuses or lies. When I arrived at the center, Marlene was already waiting in the lobby, her vibrant smile a stark contrast to the frail woman I had grown accustomed to seeing. She embraced me tightly, her eyes shining with gratitude. "Thank you, Hallie," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "for never giving up on me." I squeezed her hand reassuringly. "You don't need to thank me, Marlene. I'm just glad you're feeling better." As we made our way to my car, I couldn't help but notice the renewed strength in Marlene's step. It was as if her determination had reignited, fueling her recovery. And in that moment, I knew she was ready to face her son's cruelty head-on. Once we were settled in my apartment, I wasted no time in laying out the evidence I had gathered. Marlene's expression hardened as she watched the footage, her jaw clenching with each new instance of Tate's neglect. "That heartless boy," she muttered, her voice trembling with anger. "How could he treat his own mother this way?" I reached out and clasped her hand in mine, my gaze unwavering. "We're going to make him pay, Marlene, together." A determined glint shone in her eyes, and she nodded resolutely. "Whatever it takes." As we pored over the details of our plan, a sense of righteousness washed over me. Tate had made his choices, and now it was time for him to face the consequences. With Marlene by my side, nothing could stop us from seeking the justice we deserved. With Marlene's recovery progressing remarkably, the time had come to set our plan in motion. We would make Tate answer for his cruelty, exposing his true colors in front of those he respected most. "Are you sure you're up for this, dear?" I asked Marlene as we pored over the guest list. "We can postpone if you need more time." Her steely gaze met mine, resolution etched into every line of her face. "No more delays, Hallie. That boy needs to be taught a lesson, and I intend to be there when he gets it." I nodded, suppressing a smile at her unwavering determination. Together, we finalized the invitations for a family dinner under the guise of celebrating Marlene's miraculous recovery. But our true intentions were far more sinister. One by one, I reached out to our guests, close friends and relatives who had witnessed Tate's neglect firsthand. Their outrage at his behavior only fueled our resolve, and they eagerly agreed to attend, eager to see justice served. As the preparations unfolded, a palpable sense of anticipation hung in the air. Marlene and I worked tirelessly, ensuring every detail was perfect. The table was set with exquisite care, the meal meticulously planned, and the evidence, the damning footage and testimonies, carefully organized, ready to be unveiled at the opportune moment. Finally, the night of the dinner arrived, and our guests began to trickle in, their expressions a mix of curiosity and thinly veiled concern. They had no idea what was in store, but their trust in us was unwavering. As Tate strode through the door, fashionably late as always, a hush fell over the room. His eyes widened briefly at the sight of Marlene, vibrant and radiant, before his customary smirk slid into place. "Mother," he drawled, leaning in to plant a perfunctory kiss on her cheek, "you're looking well." Marlene's gaze was icy, her tone clipped. "Yes, thanks to Hallie's unwavering care and support." Tate's brow furrowed, but before he could respond, I stepped forward, my heart pounding with a mixture of nerves and righteous fury. "Shall we get started?" I gestured towards the dining table, my voice ringing with false cheer. As the meal progressed, the tension in the air was palpable. Tate regaled the guests with tales of his latest business exploits, oblivious to the scrutinizing glances darting his way. Marlene and I exchanged covert glances, our hands clasped tightly beneath the table, silently reassuring each other. Finally, as dessert was served, I cleared my throat, commanding the attention of everyone present. "Before we conclude our evening, there's something we'd like to share with you all." Tate's brow furrowed, but he remained silent, his curiosity piqued. With a slight nod from Marlene, I pressed play on the remote control, and the damning footage began to roll, bathing the room in an eerie glow. Tate's face contorted in horror as the evidence of his neglect played out for all to see, his mask of indifference shattered. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the sound of Marlene's voice, steady and resolute. "You've disappointed me for the last time, Tate." As the implications of her words sank in, Tate's veneer of composure crumbled, his true colors on full display. And in that moment, I knew our retribution was complete. The deafening silence that followed Marlene's declaration was shattered by the scraping of Tate's chair as he abruptly stood, his face contorted in rage. "How dare you?" he spat, his voice trembling with barely contained fury. "You're going to take the word of this woman over your own son?" Marlene's gaze remained steady, her expression unflinching. "The evidence speaks for itself, Tate. You've had countless opportunities to be there for me, but you chose your selfish ambitions instead." Tate's nostrils flared, and he rounded on me, his eyes blazing with accusation. "This is your doing, isn't it? You've been poisoning her against me from the start." Before I could respond, Marlene raised a hand, effectively silencing him. "Enough, Tate. Hallie has shown me more love and devotion than you ever have. She's the one who deserves my gratitude, not you." A murmur rippled through our guests, their expressions ranging from shock to righteous indignation. They had witnessed Tate's true colors, laid bare for all to see. Tate's gaze swept the room, his desperation palpable. "You can't all seriously believe this charade. She's manipulating you, can't you see?" But his pleas fell on deaf ears. One by one, our friends and relatives voiced their support for Marlene's decision, recounting their own experiences with Tate's neglect and indifference. As the onslaught of testimony continued, Tate's bravado crumbled, his mask of arrogance slipping away to reveal the pathetic, selfish man beneath. He slumped back into his chair, head in his hands, as the weight of his misdeeds bore down upon him. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he raised his head, his eyes hollow and defeated. "Mother, please, give me another chance. I'll do better, I swear." But Marlene's resolve was unshakable. "It's too late for promises, Tate. You've made your choices, and now you must live with the consequences." With those words, she reached into her pocket and withdrew a document, sliding it across the table towards him. "These are the revised terms of my will. As of today, you have no claim to my assets or estate. Everything will be left to Hallie." Tate's eyes widened in disbelief as he scanned the pages, his face draining of color. You can't do this to me. But his protests were met with stony silence. Marlene had made her decision, and there was no turning back. As the evening drew to a close, our guests filtered out, offering words of support and congratulations. Tate remained slumped in his chair, a broken man, his world crumbling around him. Marlene approached me, her expression a mix of sorrow and resolution. It's done, Hallie. He brought this upon himself, I nodded, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. You did the right thing, Marlene. Now we can move forward, without his toxicity weighing us down. As we surveyed the aftermath of our reckoning, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. Tate had been exposed for the selfish, heartless man he truly was, and he would never again be able to hurt or neglect those he claimed to love. It was a bittersweet victory, but one that was necessary for our healing to begin. In the days following our explosive confrontation, a tense silence descended upon the house. Tate had retreated into his study, emerging only for brief periods with a haunted look in his eyes. The reality of his actions had finally caught up to him, and the consequences were devastating. I expected him to lash out, to rage against the injustice of it all, but instead he seemed defeated, a mere shadow of the arrogant man he once was. It was almost pitiable, watching him grapple with the weight of his own selfish choices. Almost, but not quite. Marlene, on the other hand, carried herself with a newfound sense of purpose. The burden of Tate's neglect had been lifted, and she was determined to make the most of her second chance at life. I want to sell the house, she announced one morning over breakfast, her voice steady and resolute. I nearly choked on my coffee. Sell the house? But this is your home. She waved a dismissive hand. It's too big for just the two of us, and it holds too many memories of. She trailed off, but the implication was clear. This place was tainted by Tate's indifference. Of course, I murmured, reaching across the table to give her hand a gentle squeeze. Whatever you want, Marlene, I'm with you every step of the way. Her eyes softened and she returned the gesture, a small smile tugging at her lips. I know, dear, and I'm grateful for that. In the weeks that followed, I set about making preparations for the sale. Tate remained holed up in his study, emerging only to half-heartedly protest our decisions before retreating once more. You can't just cut me out like this, he snarled one evening, his eyes wild with desperation. Marlene, please reconsider. I'm your son. But Marlene was unmoved, her gaze steely and unwavering. You made your choice a long time ago, Tate, and now you have to live with the consequences. His shoulders slumped, and for a moment, I almost felt a twinge of pity for him. Almost. As the moving date approached, I caught glimpses of Tate making furtive phone calls, his brow furrowed in concentration. I knew he was grasping at straws, searching for any legal loophole that might allow him to contest Marlene's decisions. But his efforts were in vain. Unbeknownst to him, I had already taken steps to ensure that Marlene's wishes would be carried out to the letter. With the help of a trusted attorney, we had dotted every I and crossed every T, leaving no room for Tate's interference. The day we finally loaded the last of our belongings into the moving truck, I caught Tate watching from the window of his study, his expression unreadable. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met, and I saw a flicker of something akin to regret cross his features. But it was too little, too late. The damage had been done, and there was no turning back. As we pulled away from the house, leaving Tate and the remnants of our former life behind, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was the end of an era, but also the beginning of something new, a future where Marlene and I could forge our own path, unburdened by the toxic presence of her neglectful son. And as for Tate, well, he would have to learn to live with the consequences of his actions, just as we had lived with the pain of his indifference for far too long. The warm summer breeze caressed my face as I stepped out onto the balcony of our new apartment, a sense of peace washing over me. It had been 6 months since Marlene and I had left the old house behind, and the change had been transformative. Hallie, dear, come take a look at this. Marlene's voice rang out from inside, filled with excitement. I hurried back into the living room, where she was beaming at me from her favorite armchair, a stack of glossy brochures in her lap. What is it? I asked, unable to contain my own smile at her infectious enthusiasm. I've been researching art classes, she explained, patting the seat beside her in invitation. There are so many wonderful options in the area, and I think it would be the perfect way for you to get back into teaching. My heart swelled with gratitude as I settled next to her, scanning the brochures with renewed interest. Teaching had been my passion before the chaos of recent years, and the prospect of returning to it filled me with a sense of purpose. These look amazing. Marlene, I murmured, squeezing her hand affectionately. Thank you for thinking of me. She waved away my thanks, her eyes sparkling with joy. Nonsense, dear. You've done so much for me. It's the least I can do to support your dreams. As we pored over the class listings, chatting animatedly about the possibilities, I couldn't help but reflect on how far we had come. The dark cloud of Tate's neglect had lifted, allowing us to bask in the warmth of our newfound freedom. In the months since our confrontation, I had barely heard from Tate. A part of me wondered if he had finally accepted the consequences of his actions, or if he was simply biding his time, waiting for an opportunity to strike back. But those thoughts were quickly pushed aside as Marlene's laughter filled the room, her energy and zest for life a constant reminder of the strength she possessed. You know, Hallie, she mused, her expression turning contemplative, I never would have had the courage to stand up to Tate if it weren't for you. I opened my mouth to protest, but she held up a hand silencing me. No, let me finish. You showed me what it truly means to care for someone, to put their needs above your own, and in doing so, you gave me the strength to take back control of my life. Tears pricked at the corners of my eyes as I listened to her heartfelt words, overwhelmed by the depth of her gratitude. Thank you, Marlene, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion, for trusting me and for giving me the chance to be a part of your family. She reached out and cupped my cheek, her touch gentle and reassuring. You are my family, Hallie, and together we've created something beautiful out of the ashes of Tate's selfishness. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our bond forged through the fires of adversity and strengthened by our unwavering support for one another. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. The path forward may not be easy, but with Marlene by my side, I knew we could weather any storm. And as for Tate, well, he had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences, alone, without the love and support of the family he had so callously discarded. It was a harsh lesson, but one that he had brought upon himself, and in the end, his loss was our gain. A chance to start anew, to build a life filled with love, laughter, and the unbreakable bond of chosen family. The breeze whipped my hair across my face as the cherry blossoms rained down around us. I looked over at Nolan, taking in his chiseled jawline and kind eyes. He had one hand rested gently on the back of my wheelchair as he pushed me along the winding path in the park. It's so beautiful here, I said. Thank you for bringing me. Of course, darling, Nolan replied, leaning down to plant a soft kiss on my forehead. I'd do anything for you, you know that. I smiled up at him, my heart swelling. After the accident that left me paralyzed, Nolan had been my rock. He took care of my every need, catering to my wheelchair, helping me bathe, making sure I took my medications. I didn't know what I would do without him. We continued through the park, the pavement smooth beneath my wheelchair. Up ahead, the path sloped downwards towards a small bridge crossing a stream. Oh, look, the bridge, I said. Let's stop for a moment once we cross. Of course, Nolan said, his voice suddenly tense. As we started down the slope, he pivoted my chair sideways. Before I could ask what he was doing, he leaned down, his lips nearly touching my ear. I'm bankrupt, he whispered harshly. I've blown through your inheritance. I need that life insurance money if we're going to live comfortably. My heart dropped into my stomach as words registered. What are you saying? I gasped. I'm so sorry about this, darling. With that, he shoved my wheelchair forward with immense force. I screamed as I hurtled down the steep slope, bracing myself as the wheelchair hit the bottom and flipped over, tossing me onto the hard ground. Sharp pain radiated through my body and my vision blurred. Nolan! I tried to shout, but it came out as a whimper. I heard his footsteps crunching on the gravel as he approached. When he leaned over me, his face was a mask of anguish. Oh my God, Alara, he cried. I'm so sorry. I lost control of your wheelchair. Here, let me get you back in. As he righted the wheelchair, disbelief flooded through me. He was pretending that this was an accident. He scooped me up and gently placed me back in the seat, his brows knitted together in feigned worry. I scanned the area wildly, but we were alone. What have you done? I choked out, barely able to get the words out past the pain in my ribs. Shh, he soothed. Try not to move. You might have broken something. I'm going to call an ambulance. As he pretended to dial his phone, I saw a flash of panic cross his face. His plan had gone horribly wrong. He knelt down next to me again, taking my hand in his. Just hang on, baby. Help is coming. I promise I'll take care of you. The false affection in his voice made me want to vomit. Hot tears spilled down my cheeks as I realized the man I loved had tried to kill me. The steady beep of the heart monitor greeted me as I blinked open my eyes. I was in a hospital room, my body aching. Nolan sat in a chair next to the bed, his leg heavily bandaged. He looked up as I stirred, relief washing over his face. Oh, thank God you're awake, he gushed, grasping my hand. I was so worried. My pulse quickened as memories came flooding back. The wheelchair careening down the hill, Nolan's cold confession, his botched attempt to kill me. I yanked my hand away. Don't touch me, I hissed. Nolan drew back, feigning confusion. Alara, what's wrong? You pushed me down that hill. You wanted me dead for the insurance money, I accused. Nolan's mouth fell open. What? No, it was an accident. I would never hurt you, Alara. I tried to stop the wheelchair, but it went out of control. I jumped down the slope after you, but my leg got caught between the wheelchair spokes as I tried to stop your fall. I'm so sorry I couldn't prevent you from getting hurt. I studied his face, searching for any hint of deception, but found only earnest concern. The doctor said you have a concussion, Nolan continued. You must have imagined what happened due to the head trauma. Doubt crept into my mind. Could I have imagined it? My memories from that day were hazy. And now Nolan was injured too. I glanced at his bandaged leg, guilt replacing the suspicion. I'm sorry, I stammered. I must be confused. Nolan squeezed my hand reassuringly. It's okay. I'm just glad you're all right. Over the next few days, as my injuries healed, Nolan doted on me relentlessly. He fluffed my pillows, fed me soup, and held my hand when the pain meds wore off. His unwavering devotion made me feel foolish for ever questioning his intentions. But as the weeks passed, small things seemed off. Nolan became obsessed with money, poring over our accounts and insurance policies. He insisted on extravagant home modifications to accommodate my wheelchair, urging me to pay for them with my inheritance. One night, as I wheeled into the bedroom, Nolan slammed his laptop shut quickly. What are you looking at? I asked. Oh, nothing important, he said, avoiding eye contact. While he was in the shower, I opened the laptop and accessed the browser history. My heart sank as I saw searches for how to increase your spouse's life insurance and big payouts for accidental deaths. Nolan hadn't been searching for accident victims to help. He was researching how to profit from my hypothetical accidental death. Bile rose in my throat as I finally accepted the truth. The devoted caregiver routine was an act to keep me under his control. The man I loved was trying to murder me. Over the next few weeks, I settled into a new normal. The doctors said my paralysis was permanent, so Nolan dutifully catered to my needs. But his mask slipped more each day. He obsessed over my inheritance, insisting I use it to convert our home into a wheelchair paradise. Meanwhile, he splurged on golf clubs, TVs, and gadgets. One night at dinner, he brought it up again. Alara, I really think we should overhaul the entryway and widen the door frames downstairs. We need to make this house accessible for you. I pushed my food around my plate, anxiety churning in my gut. Those renovations will deplete the remainder of my inheritance. Can't we just make do? Nolan frowned, a flash of anger in his eyes. But don't you want to be comfortable and self-sufficient? This inheritance is meant to be used on you. I couldn't tell him the truth, that I was preserving those funds to escape someday. Let's just discuss it later, I said weakly, hoping to placate him. After dinner, I went upstairs and discovered Nolan had installed a new safe in our closet. He never mentioned it, and it was already locked. What was he hiding? A few nights later, Nolan left his email open on my laptop. My eyes fixed on one message from an insurance company with the subject line, Policy Upgrade Request. Hands trembling, I opened it. Nolan had asked to increase my life insurance and add an accidental death payout. When I confronted him, he insisted it was just to provide for me in case of tragedy. But I knew it was premeditation. The final straw came a week later when I overheard Nolan on the phone scheduling a lavish housekeeping service. We didn't need it, but he seemed hell-bent on draining my inheritance with frivolous spending. After he hung up, I wheeled into the kitchen and tossed my checkbook onto the counter. "I'll be handling my own finances going forward," I informed him coldly. Nolan's facade fully slipped, his face contorting in anger. "How dare you? That money is as much mine as it is yours." "It's my inheritance," I shot back, "and I'm done letting you blow it." Nolan advanced on me, his voice a low snarl. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything I've done for you." Adrenaline coursed through me. "The jig is up, Nolan. I won't let you steal my inheritance while you plot my murder." Rage blazed in his eyes, but he quickly masked it. "Don't be ridiculous," he sneered. "I'll never understand your paranoia. But fine, manage your own money. It doesn't change my love and devotion." His duplicity infuriated me further, but I held my tongue. I needed to protect my finances at all costs until I could find a way out. Over the next few weeks, money became a battleground in our home. I took over the finances, carefully tracking every penny. When Nolan demanded I hire his lavish housekeeping service, I refused. "We don't need it," I said firmly. "I can handle the cleaning." Nolan's face darkened. "But in your condition." "I'm fine," I cut him off. "We're not wasting money." After that, our arguments escalated. Nolan increasingly spent money behind my back, on expensive takeout when I cooked simple meals, new electronics, anything he desired. One day, I came home to find he had purchased a $3,000 Tempur-Pedic mattress without consulting me. "Return it now," I demanded. "Why are you being so controlling?" he shot back. "I'm just trying to make our home nicer for you." "Bullshit," I spat. "You're bleeding our accounts dry, trying to spend my inheritance before I cut you off." Nolan's expression contorted in rage. For a moment, I thought he might hit me, but he quickly smoothed his face into a mask of polite concern. "Elara, I'm worried about you," he said gently. "This obsession with money isn't healthy. You know I just want what's best for you." I wanted to scream at his pathetically transparent manipulation, but I held myself in check. Over the next week, small amounts of cash began disappearing from my purse. $20 here, $50 there. I knew Nolan was taking it. Meanwhile, the utilities and credit card bills skyrocketed without explanation. One night, I logged into our accounts and realized why. Nolan had increased the thermostat to 85 degrees, changed our cable package to premium channels, and added himself as an authorized user to my credit card. The next morning, I changed the thermostat back and called the cable company to downgrade our plan. When Nolan realized what I'd done, he cornered me in the kitchen. "How dare you make changes without consulting me?" he bellowed. I refused to cower. "I'm correcting your frivolous spending. You're bleeding me dry." Nolan slammed his fist on the counter. "That's my money, too. You don't get to control everything." "It's my inheritance," I shouted back. "I see exactly what you're doing, trying to drain that money, but I won't let you get away with it." Nolan stepped closer, looming over me. "You'll regret this," he hissed. "That money is the only reason I'm stuck playing your little wheelchair nursemaid." I recoiled at his words, my worst fears confirmed. Our relationship was nothing but a ruse designed to steal my inheritance. "Get away from me," I snarled. "We're done." I wheeled my chair backwards from him, my heart pounding with rage and adrenaline. The man I loved was gone. All that remained was a manipulating thief trying to drive me to bankruptcy or death. But I wouldn't back down or surrender my independence. Not to him, not to anyone. The battle lines were drawn. After our blow-up, I stopped speaking to Nolan altogether. The loving facade had slipped away, exposing his deceit. Now we coexisted in tense silence, speaking only when necessary. I continued scrutinizing our accounts, noticing strange inconsistencies. Gas and grocery expenditures were double what they should have been. When I asked Nolan about it, he got evasive. "I've just been driving more for errands," he muttered, "and groceries are expensive lately." I knew he was lying and pocketing the extra cash, but I had no proof. Suspicions gnawed at me. Where was he driving? Was he seeing someone else? I decided to find out. I called a private investigator and explained my situation. 2 days later, I received a large envelope in the mail. Hands shaking, I opened it to find photos of Nolan embracing a woman in front of a nice suburban home, captioned with an address. Bile rose in my throat as I realized the truth. Nolan had a secret family. Fury coursed through me. All the manipulation and lies weren't just about money. He was living a double life. I wanted to confront him right away, but I waited. I needed more proof before initiating the inevitable divorce. A few days later, the investigator provided bank records indicating Nolan had purchased the other home outright and was funneling money into a joint account with the other woman. Her name was Celia. Armed with evidence, I decided to confront Nolan at the hospital where he volunteered, a smokescreen for his deceit. As I wheeled into the hospital lobby, I spotted Nolan at the front desk flirting with a nurse. Before he saw me, I called out loudly, "Hey, Nolan, how's Celia doing?" Nolan's head whipped around, his face draining of color when he saw me. He quickly masked his shock with feigned confusion. "Who?" he stammered. I threw the envelope of evidence onto the desk. Photos and bank records spilled out. "Save it!" I spat. "I know about your little wifey across town. Did you really think you could get away with it?" Nolan glared at me coldly. "You don't know what you're talking about. This is absurd." I shook my head in disgust. "The jig is up, Nolan. I'm filing for divorce. Have fun splitting your assets between two households." I wheeled my chair away, Nolan calling after me desperately. But I didn't stop. The time for mercy was over. Over the next few days, I met with lawyers to initiate divorce proceedings, documenting Nolan's infidelity and financial deceit. I wanted to ruin him. Soon after, I sat Nolan down at home. "Here are your options," I told him icily. "Agree to a divorce with zero spousal support, letting me keep 100% of my inheritance, or I'll make sure every one of your friends and family knows exactly what a cheating, swindling scumbag you are." Nolan pleaded with me, but I refused to back down. The man I loved was gone. In his place was a manipulative stranger who needed to pay. After I presented the evidence, Nolan had no choice but to agree to my terms. The divorce was swift and brutal, leaving him financially devastated. I walked away free, my inheritance intact, ready to begin a new chapter away from my lying, cheating ex-husband. What awaited me was unclear, but it had to be better than the nightmare I'd endured. In the months after the divorce, I focused on recovery and adapting to my new normal. My lawyer ensured I received a generous alimony, allowing me to afford live-in care. Though my paralysis persisted, my new doctor encouraged me to stay positive. "Your condition is still evolving," he assured me. "With rehabilitation, you may regain functionality." His optimism lifted my spirits. For the first time since the accident, I had hope. During one appointment, Dr. Fields reviewed my records closely, his brow furrowing. "Let's do some fresh scans," he said. The next day, I received an urgent call from Dr. Fields. "You need to come in immediately," he said gravely. "There are developments." My pulse quickened anxiously as I wheeled into his office. His expression was grim. "What is it?" I asked shakily. "The scans show your spinal cord damage is treatable," he said. "Your previous physician failed to detect this. With surgery, you could walk again." I reeled in shock. "What? But my ex-husband said my paralysis was permanent. Are you saying it's reversible?" Dr. Fields nodded. "Given proper treatment, your prognosis is very good. I believe your previous doctor misinterpreted the scans. Your ex likely concealed this from you." The revelation hit me like a freight train. Nolan had lied to keep me in a wheelchair, dependent on him. Fury boiled up inside me. "That bastard!" I exploded. "He made me believe I'd never walk again. He wanted me helpless so he could control me and access my money." "I'm very sorry," Dr. Field said sympathetically. "Unfortunately, traumatic spinal cord injuries are often misdiagnosed. But the good news is, we can correct this. I'd like to schedule surgery right away." Overwhelmed with emotion, I broke down in tears. For months, I believed I'd spend my life in a wheelchair at the mercy of my lying, cheating ex-husband. But now a chance at freedom stood before me. The night before surgery, I met Nolan at a cafe at his desperate request. He begged me to take him back, claiming he'd changed. "Did you know my paralysis was reversible?" I demanded. "Did you keep it from me?" Nolan's silence was damning. Seething with rage, I slapped him hard across the face. "You soulless monster! You made me believe I was trapped when I could have walked away from you." Well, tomorrow I'm getting surgery so I can dance on your grave someday. I pray I never see you again. I left Nolan crying at the table, his pathetic apologies echoing behind me. The time for mercy and forgiveness had passed. Tomorrow, a new beginning awaited me. The surgery was a success. In the difficult weeks of recovery and rehabilitation that followed, spite fueled me. I imagined trampling over Nolan's broken body as I reclaimed my strength, vowing he'd never rob me of independence again. On the day I took my first solo steps, tears of joy and relief streamed down my face. I was free at last, ready to walk into a new life on my own terms. Nolan had failed. My backbone remained unbroken. In the weeks after my surgery, I wasted no time seeking final vengeance against Nolan. Legally, financially, I wanted to ruin him completely. I met with my lawyer, providing documentation of Nolan's lies about my medical prognosis. We incorporated it into the divorce proceedings to show premeditation and abuse. Nolan wouldn't just lose money in the split, his reputation would be destroyed. You have ample grounds for additional damages, my lawyer said. We can sequester his assets and income sources. He won't have a cent left when we're through with him. Good, I replied coldly. Take everything. I realized Nolan's bank fraud likely extended beyond just me. I contacted his employer and provided evidence that he had embezzled from client accounts. They immediately opened an investigation, alerting the authorities. Nolan desperately tried to convince me not to expose him further. He even had the audacity to suggest reconciliation. Alara, haven't you punished me enough? He pleaded on the phone. I know I made mistakes, but we can still repair this. I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. The only mistake I made was ever trusting you, I spat back. You tried to steal my inheritance and leave me helpless. There's no coming back from that. I hung up, feeling re-energized in my mission to obliterate him. The next day, I called his half-sister, Layla, who he always clashed with. I told her everything, from the infidelity to the financial deceit. I knew he was selfish, but this is unbelievable, she fumed. What a wretched snake. He's dead to me. I'll make sure everyone knows what a vile pig he is. In the weeks that followed, Nolan's life unraveled spectacularly. Friends and family shunned him. He lost his job once the fraud was exposed. Even Celia kicked him out once she learned what he did to me, disgusted by his abhorrent behavior. The divorce finalized with me receiving 80% of our shared assets plus permanent alimony payments, money he no longer had. He'd be financially ruined for years. My lawyer called one final time. It's done, he said with satisfaction. Your ex-husband is destitute. His reputation is shredded. You won't be hearing from him again anytime soon. A surge of relief and joy coursed through me. The bitter seeds I'd sown had bloomed into Nolan's complete destruction. He was finally reaping what he deserved, and I was forever free from his poisonous hold on my life. The day my divorce from Nolan was finalized, I walked out of the courthouse with my head held high, the sunlight warming my face. The settlement had been everything I wanted. Nolan was left penniless and alone, forced to start anew with nothing but his wretched self. In the months that followed, I reveled in my freedom and independence. I returned to work, reconnected with old friends, traveled to places I'd always dreamed of seeing. Whenever despair crept in, I repeated my mantra, Nolan has no power over you now. My new therapist helped me process the emotional trauma I'd endured. It's important you don't dwell on anger, she counseled gently. Focus your energy on healing so you can fully embrace this new chapter of your life. I took her advice to heart, channeling my energy into constructive pursuits that enriched my life. I volunteered at a women's shelter, helping those escaping abusive situations. It strengthened my resolve to never again ignore red flags in a relationship. On my birthday a few months later, my friends threw a party celebrating my freedom. As we raised our glasses, Sarah made a toast. Here's to Alara, for her resilience, courage, and for shattering the chains of her miserable marriage. No one deserves this fresh start more than her. Their cheers filled me with newfound hope. The old Alara, helpless, naive, trapped, was gone. A wiser, stronger woman had taken her place. Slowly, I began dating again. After some duds, I met Adam, a kind divorcee and single father. While affection bloomed between us, I took it slow, keeping healthy boundaries. I'm so glad you're being cautious, Sarah told me. After everything you've endured, you deserve someone who treats you like the queen you are. While Adam was nothing like Nolan, trusting again didn't come easily. But in time, as his sincerity was proven, my walls came down, brick by brick. One night, as we strolled in the park, I paused under a canopy of twinkling lights strung between the trees. Here, surrounded by the beauty of new beginnings, my heart opened once more. When Adam proposed several months later, I accepted joyfully. While shadows of the past still lurked, the flame burning inside me was stronger. I was prepared for whatever lay ahead, holding fast to hope. On my second wedding day, I marveled at the new chapters life offers, even after devastation. With grace, courage, and perseverance, dormant seeds of joy still blossom in time. As I walked down the aisle on Adam's arm, tears pricked my eyes. My broken spirit had proven resilient. Love and vitality now stretched brightly before me. While Nolan's betrayal nearly extinguished my light, my inner inferno ultimately raged too strong to suffocate. I am more than a victim or survivor. I am the master of my fate, and my greatest triumphs still await.